fitness and wellness expert, naturopath, and adventure enthusiast Wendy Pett.
And my husband, Todd Isberner. He's a fundraising guru, men's mentor, and Bible scholar.
And as a couple, we're going to share riveting breakthrough stories from our guests who've experienced the meaning of a changed life.
Our hope is that you will be inspired, equipped, and entertained along your own life journey.
So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm Todd Isberner.
And I'm Wendy Pett.
And Wendy, I got to just start real quickly on something here. I know it's a distraction what we're going to go here, but did you find your car keys?
What?
Did you?
Am I
did
missing
you find
them?
your car keys?
I didn't know I was missing them. Did I lose my car keys?
Not actually this time, but I can guarantee you
There's been a few times.
No, it's not going to be very long before you do. And then we're both going to have these moments of anxiety. We're going to have to try to find your keys and it'll probably end up in your purse.
Okay. So what you're saying is today's podcast is all about how not to lose your keys?
I actually wish it was that simple, but no, it's on a much more serious note, actually, of what happens when we experience a very hurtful loss and then how we break through to find opportunities that God can provide through that loss.
Yeah. And whether it's been the loss of a loved one, a job, a pet, or even a future dream cut short, everyone has to deal with some kind of loss at some point in their lives.
Yeah, true. And how you handle it is going to be the difference between prolonged pain and resentment or discovering new opportunities and freedom.
Yeah. So today's guest is Wayne Pederson, and he has dealt with a loss, actually several losses, and is going to share his stories of how he got through them and what he learned in the process. But why don't you read his bio quick?
Well, let's learn a little bit about Wayne Pederson,
let's do that.
An old friend of mine that goes way back in the radio days. I have to preface that because who knows what's going to come
Another radio
up.
guy. How
I
fun
know.
is this?
It's like the good old boys club. So you'll fit right in, Wendy. I promise you.
Okay, thanks.
So Wayne actually started his career in 1967. He was an announcer on KTIS in Minneapolis. And I remember that so well because I had just become a new Christian and somebody told me to tune into KTIS, and there was Wayne in the afternoons. I loved his show.
Okay, it's not about you. Keep reading his bio.
Okay, sorry about that.
But it's exciting.
He's also producer of a number of shows on the Skylight Satellite Radio Network, one of the first satellite networks in the country. And he became manager then of KTIS, then was promoted executive vice president for media at University of Northwestern in St. Paul. And during that time, he also served on the board of the National Religious Broadcasters, very influential group. And then in 2004, Wayne was recruited by Moody Bible Institute, that's in Chicago, and he was manager of WMBI. After that, he was promoted then to president of broadcasting for Moody, and he was overseeing their 37 radio stations. So
wow.
Yeah, quite a large task of responsibility. 4 years later, God called Wayne to serve the world of global media as the president of HCJB, and that's a mouthful. So they changed their name to Reach Beyond, and they had planted over 500 radio stations around the globe, and they're still going strong. Well, in 2016, Wayne, he stepped aside, and he then started to serve as a liaison, a consultant, a media spokesperson, a public speaker for a number of international ministries, including Far Eastern Broadcasting. And Wayne continues that very important work. He's on a number of boards and committees and just like busier than he was, I think, ever before. And his wife and he, Willie, they reside in Colorado Springs. He's got 2 daughters, beautiful adult daughters who've given him 9 grandchildren in Wyoming and Minnesota.
Yeah. So welcome, Wayne, to Your Biggest Breakthrough. We are so glad to have you.
Well, thank you. This is a lot of fun to reconnect. Todd and I have been partners for many, many years, and one of my most valued friends over the years. And Wendy, getting to know you, and we just have so many things in common, lifestyle things, and our faith in Christ, of course, and our love for others and our love for God. So this is a special treat for me.
Oh, yeah. We just love you and Willie. And I thank you for coming on. And I just want to jump right out of the gate here, because I know we're going to hear about the stories about your losses and your lessons. But first, I'm really curious, when you were growing up, did life prepare you in some way on how to face these losses? Because it seems that for most, we're just really not prepared, and it just hits us, right?
Yeah, well, I grew up a very happy kid, had a happy family life on a dairy farm in northern Minnesota, and throwing hay bales and shoveling grain and other unmentionable things we had to shovel on the farm.
Let me guess.
This is the international radio icon telling you where his roots are from, and I love that.
But growing up in the country, I mean, it was just wonderful, small town. What happened after my first year at the university, my mom passed away of cancer. She'd been battling cancer for 2 or 3 years. And she was 44 when she died. I was 19. And I was the oldest of 5 kids. Wow. And losing your mom changes your life. I mean, it changes your personality and your perspective, because she was the humble prayer warrior, encourager, nurturer kind of person. I just loved my mom. And now, she was gone. She suffered so much, and to be in the arms of Jesus was a good thing for her. But I finished my degree at the U, and we'll get more into that as well. So in a way, as I look back with some of the other losses, that loss at the age of 19 taught me something about the unexpected left turns that come into our life that we have to somehow adjust to and decide how we're going to go down that road.
Yeah, that was like your crash course, because I'm thinking, when you were younger, you didn't have a Bible class on how to handle loss. You didn't have somebody tutor you on what would happen when you have a loss.
There wasn't a Facebook group,
right? Doesn't it seem? I mean, we get smacked in the face with a loss, and then if we're not prepared on how to handle it, we've got to get it figured out. And that's what I love about you being our guest today, because we're all going to face some loss. It's going to hit us sometime when we least expect it. So how do we begin that preparation for the unexpected and going through that process?
Well, fortunately, I grew up in a very strong Bible teaching evangelical country Lutheran church. And you know what happens in small communities? You get a group around you. I mean, when my mom died, our table was piled with food. The neighbors and the friends and people from church supported us. So that was an important grounding. My mentors as a teenager were old guys that went to our church that taught me what a life of faith and holy living was all about. And I was blessed with 2 wonderful Christian parents that guided me. And I had a great youth group that we supported one another. So having people around me, godly peers and respected elders, was really actually a very, very big part of my spiritual foundation for what would come next.
Yeah, there's something to be said about true community that comes together and just sits with you during the time of grief and loss. They don't have to say a word, but just to be with you. And that's a beautiful thing.
I was just thinking too, for parents who have got little kids, they're going to lose something, right? And whatever is that they lose, it's going to be precious to them. I wonder if it doesn't open up a teaching opportunity.
Oh, you mean the little kid that loses something?
Yeah, the little kid that loses something, for the parent to begin to open up that avenue of just teaching them some valuable things about how to handle their little loss, right? Because they're going to experience a series of them growing up. So,
sometimes I think we shield our kids too much. We want to protect them. We want to defend off all the problems. We don't always do our kids a service when we protect them from trials and loss and challenges. Rather, while they're under our roof, to teach them how to deal with these things as they come along. The world is a rugged place. It's crazy out there. And the more we can prepare our kids while we have them in our home for the onslaughts on their faith they'll face at the university or in the world of work, we do a better job if we can help them know how to face those kinds of challenges.
Yeah, well said.
I wonder if what you just said is kind of what we're seeing, the repercussions of, I guess, in the world today of the generation that had children, and they're now in their 20s, 30s, and they are not handling life the way I guess most would in a healthy fashion. And I guess that's a judgment right there. But I'm just seeing that there could have been something to do with how the parents raised them. That's why the world is the way it is right now.
Well, and look at what kids have had to deal with this past year. No high school, college graduations, no proms, no championship football games, whatever. And a lot of loss. And plus working at school alone with a computer screen in front of you, the isolation, the lack of hope. And the kids that have been adequately prepared with a strong support group have survived or even thrived. But those that haven't had that, we're having an epidemic of teenage young adult depression and suicide today because they have not been conditioned to how to face trials when they come along.
Yeah.
So two things you mentioned earlier that have just kind of stuck with me, and one is you have to develop a relationship with God, and you have to come to a place of knowing that He's trustworthy. That's key to handling a loss, because everybody kind of wants to get it all figured out, and sometimes you're just not able to. And then the second thing was just this idea of community, a strong family or church or group that you can really tap into who are supporting you along the way. I mean, those are key ingredients, Wayne.
Yeah, absolutely.
No question.
So Wayne, tell us about the loss of your wife, Norma.
Well, I had a fabulous marriage with Norma. Todd knew her well. She often traveled with us. She was this sweet, quiet, humble, loving Norwegian girl that we went to high school. We were high school sweethearts. We started dating when I was a senior in high school.
Well, and you didn't grow up in some major metropolitan area. We're talking about a tiny, tiny little town. So
Fertile, Minnesota, population 900.
Fertile, 900? Seriously?
Wow.
They weren't fertile enough, I guess, to grow the population any more than that. But
so it was slim pickings for everybody, but God brought the two of you together.
Yeah, we did. We dated for 4 years, and we lived in Minneapolis. Here's the thing about Norma. She was a good listener. And she was compassionate. She was strong spiritually, had a solid foundation. And if you would meet her in 20 minutes, you would feel you were her best friend because she was a good listener. She focused entirely on you. As a result, she didn't share much of herself, but she would focus on the other person. So she gained many, many friendships through that. We had a strong marriage. It wasn't always smooth, but it was strong. And the last 2 years of her life, which we'll talk about in a minute, we grew even more close as we walked through the journey of cancer together. But I was blessed with a wonderful, wonderful partner for all those years. And even as I moved from place to place, first to Washington, D.C., and then California, and then Colorado, and
don't forget Chicago. You've been all over the place.
Chicago, and Norma would say, remember, wherever God leads you, I'm with you. I mean, that's the kind of person she was.
Yeah.
Wow. I just got to stop there for a moment because I knew the two of you so well for so many years. You really did have one of those model marriages, and that doesn't mean everything was rosy, hunky-dory all the time. But what were the key components of having such a happy, fulfilling marriage?
Well, we had a lot in common because we grew up in the same community, and we're in youth group together. So we were friends actually before we became lovers, so to speak, and before we were romantic. And I think that was a big part of it. There was a lot of mutual respect. I mean, she respected my giftedness. I actually had to learn to respect her giftedness about being a people person, and but respected one another in that. And she had a strong desire to serve the Lord no matter where, no matter when, no matter what. She was so flexible in that way. She was very devoted to her parents. And so we had all those ingredients of a relationship that really worked, and we could talk to each other about anything. We prayed together regularly.
Yeah.
You really
love
were
the friends first.
Oh,
part.
seriously. I was just thinking,
absolutely.
You guys showed that friendship. Wayne and I, we had some trips together, had to travel together. And I can remember how important it was for you to make sure you were always touching base with your wife. But it wasn't like a 5-minute conversation. These guys would go on for an hour and a half. And, oh my golly, all right already. But because you were such good friends, you talked about everything. Yeah. So you were so close to her. And I know that you had plans together as a couple that once you retired, you're going to go see the world. And then this thing happened. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we had been to Malaysia and Indonesia and Singapore. We came back from that trip, and this would have been May of 2013, and she had a big swollen tummy. We thought it was a tummy bug of some kind that you can pick up in that part of the world. And it didn't go away. And on Memorial Day weekend, we went up to the farm to see her mom and dad. Her mom looked at her and said, "Norma, you need to see a doctor." She knew right away something was wrong. So we drove back immediately to Colorado Springs, saw our doctor. They did an MRI, and turns out she had stage 3C ovarian cancer. And so 3 days later, she was in surgery, had the operation, a lot of things taken out, and then 3.5 months of radiation treatment and chemo. And she was doing really well. If you remember, by October, when she was done, she was doing well. We were traveling again, and we spent a week in California and a week in Florida, Naples, Florida. And NRB of 2014, she was doing well, having to rest occasionally. And on the way back from NRB, she went to Minnesota. I went back to Colorado and joined her a week later. And she said, Wayne, I don't know what's going on. I hardly eat anything and I'm gaining weight. And I spoke at a church in St. Paul that Sunday. It would have been like March 13th or something like that. 2 days later, I was going to fly back to Colorado. She was going to go up to see our kids in Duluth. And she said, Wayne, I need to see my doctor. So 2:00 in the morning, I'm on the phone with Delta, changing my flight, getting her on the flight. I'm going to Denver for ECFA board meetings. And so I get to the meeting and Norma calls the doctor, will see me right away. And the doctor said, the cancer has come back more aggressively than anything I've ever seen. She said, sometimes when these cancer cells go into recessive, they come roaring back stronger than ever. So the next day was surgery. The doctor came out of the operating room, said Norma has 6 to 12 months. Wow. And so I had to call the daughters, call Norma's parents who were in their 90s, call Norma's best friend and say, we're going to lose Norma. Norma didn't last 12 months. She didn't last 6 months. In 17 days, she was gone that fast. Wow. And it was a horrible, horrible 17 days going through all the stuff with that. So she died on April 3rd, 2014. And if you remember, Todd, 700 people came to St. Paul to the funeral.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
The church was packed.
Yeah.
It showed the love and admiration people had for her.
Big time. Yeah. Well, I know you guys had just such a beautiful relationship. I know it's still hard to talk about it. And I mean, grief is a lifelong process of sorts. So were you ever tempted to be bitter about the whole thing? Because you guys are best friends.
One of the saddest moments I remember in Norma's last week or so, she said, I was so looking forward to growing old together. And that just broke my heart when she said that. After she passed away, when she died, it was such a beautiful, holy moment. It's beyond description. When Christy and Michelle and I were standing around her, holding her hand, singing hymns, quoting scripture, and finally releasing her from this broken world into the presence of the Lord. And immediately she breathed her last. But the presence of her spirit, this made it sound a little weird, the presence of her spirit lingered in that room for minutes. I don't know how many, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. And all of a sudden, that wasn't Norma there anymore. She was not there. That was her, as her friend said, her earthly tent that was folded up and put away. She didn't need that anymore. It was lonely for sure. There's no question about that. And I grieved and I was lonely, but we've been grieving for a year actually. But God's presence has never been so real to me as it was during those lonely days, those lonely nights, coming to an empty house at the end of the day and turning on Mary Beth Carlson's wonderful piano music and opening God's word and feeling God's presence so strongly. It was a holy, holy time that I can't even begin to describe. Were there questions why? If somebody had asked me what's the worst thing that could happen to you, I would have said losing Norma. And when the worst thing that could happen to you happens, God is very near. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
You have to have a strong faith and a love and a trust for God to walk through it like that. So just back up, if you don't mind, where did that faith journey first begin? How did you first get connected with God so that at this time when you needed him most, you knew he would be there for you?
Well, as a good Lutheran, I was baptized as a baby and went through confirmation and had, a youth group. Were very, very involved in church. I was a good church boy at church. The old ladies who passed me on the head.
Wait a minute. I caught that at church.
At church.
At church, he was a good boy.
Yeah, I was church and a good boy. Okay, that was the point. And with my family as a hardworking farm boy, when I was junior high and early high school, I was a rascal. I did a lot of things I'm embarrassed to talk about.
I can't imagine.
Really?
That, Wayne.
Okay,
I just
we
can't
want to hear
imagine it.
The,
We want to
the
hear that
language
stuff.
I used, the stories I told, the antics that I pulled were so,
the
that
terror
was
of fertile Minnesota, Wayne Pederson.
I mean, I didn't smoke or chew or go with girls that do, but, it was not God honoring. We went to a Bible camp in Alexandria, Minnesota. And on the way home on the church bus from that Bible camp, one of the girls in our bus started to cry, one of the good church girls, and said, I don't know that my sin's forgiven. I don't know if I'm going to heaven. And we, in our own way as kids, prayed with her, and she confessed her sin. She with a lot of tears, she cried and accepted Jesus. And I went to my seat in the bus, and I didn't hear an audible voice, but clearly God spoke to my inner spirit. Wayne, I want to use you to share the good news of Jesus Christ with religious people that don't know me personally. And that's been my lifelong calling, to share the gospel of grace of salvation to church people that don't have a personal relationship with Christ. Good religious people that don't know Jesus.
Yeah. So that's a lot. And that was a real breakthrough for you in your own faith journey, right? Because
that was a big turnaround for me.
You went from religion to passion for Jesus.
Yeah. And what happened, I always thought, this is a little rabbit trail. I always wanted to be a radio announcer. That was my goal, to be a DJ. I loved radio. I loved music. I loved all that. So ever since I was, elementary, I wanted to be a radio announcer. So I thought that if you surrendered your life to the Lord, you'd have to be a missionary or a pastor or something. And I think that's what kind of held me back so long from really embracing Christ. So that night when I heard God's voice, I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to be a pastor. So I began that journey to prepare to be a minister or a pastor, thinking that's what you had to be if you were really dedicated to God. I later found out differently, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But that was when I turned from seeking self and pleasure in my own ambitions to, okay, what does God have for me?
I think that's such a good word, Wayne, because I think there are a lot of people in the church that still kind of think that way. Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go on missions trips. I'm going to have to devote my entire life, sell my home, just completely change everything. But you can be, like you were in media. So media missionary, there's different workplace missionary. So there's so many ways to be that missionary. And I love that that's your heart. That's really cool.
Question.
Yeah.
Well, you have developed a real intimacy with the Lord so that you can trust him through anything. And that was proven when you had the loss of the woman you wanted to go to your grave with, and especially in such an unexpected way. And yet you pulled into God, and he seemed to give you a real life opportunity for you to find out how willing are you to really, truly trust him and what is next, right?
Well, C.S. Lewis in one of his books says, do we really believe what we say believe about life, death, resurrection, heaven? If we really believe what we preach and teach and say we believe, we should rejoice and realize how short this life is and how significant eternal life with the Lord can be.
That's a good word to celebrate. So during this time, I'm just going to go back. Were there times where you were just really questioning God as well, even though you were in that place of, okay, I know this is a celebration time? Did you still question, because you had these plans together? So was it like, now what, God? What do you want me to do now? Yeah.
Well, we prayed for healing.
Yeah.
All during this time, we trusted God. I firmly believed till the very end, Norma was going to be healed. Yeah. And I was the cheerleader saying, no, Norma would say, I think this is eventually going to get me. And I say, no, we can't give up hope. We got to trust. We got to believe. We're going to beat this thing, kind of thing. Almost to the point where I think I was insensitive to the fact that she knew she was dying. And, that I have a little regret about that. But nonetheless, I was her cheerleader during that time. But did I have doubt? Yeah, we had plans. We had prayed. God didn't answer our prayer the way we asked for. We wanted to serve together. We want to do all these things. We had 9 grandkids we wanted to enjoy together. And yeah, you do ask the why or how come, but it was, I don't try to sound sanctimonious in this. It was more like, okay, God, this is rough, but what's next? I mean, Norma's in heaven with Jesus, which is way better than being here with Wayne. What's next?
Yeah.
And the fact that you were the cheerleader of you're going to get healed. I believe. And the fact that she was here 17 days versus a year. Mm-hmm. What a gift, honestly, that she did not have to suffer all that time. And I know you know that and experience that now. So that is having that celebration that God had her best interest in mind, for sure. No matter how long and how hard you cheered, he knew.
We'll talk about her later, but Willie, God brought Willie into my life that we're married now. Willie went through cancer at the exact same time Norma did. And Willie likes to say we both survived cancer. Norma is just in a different geographical location.
Yeah.
That's so good. I mean, we can talk about that now. That's so good because Willie is so amazing. And we were so grateful that, I mean, it is a God ordained union. I mean, it's like Norma blessed the union as well. And it's just beautiful to see you guys together.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because I'm guessing that you didn't have that next on your expectations list. Like, okay, I lost Norma now. What's next? Yeah. So what happened in the process of as you were, going through your grief process and trusting God, learning to grow deeper in Him, and along comes Willie?
Well, Norma and I had met Willie in Africa in 2010. We were building a clinic outside of Accra, Ghana. And Willie's church sent a work team over to help build this station and this clinic, and we dedicated a couple of radio stations. So Norma and I knew Willie, and Willie knew Norma and me, and we were friends. We were not, real close friends, but we were acquaintances. We saw each other at church. Willie was a realtor. We'd go to our open houses, that type of a thing. So never in our wildest dreams did we ever imagine we'd be married someday. Wow. But God miraculously brought us together. I wasn't looking for a mate. I was looking for companionship and friendship and that type of thing. But it was so obvious. And if you want to hear the story, I'll tell you how God brought us together.
Oh, please. Yes, because we just love Willie.
Willie was a donor to HCJB, Reach Beyond. And so we had a donor event for local donors here in Colorado Springs. And she said, I can't come. I'm out of town. And I said something like, well, let's do coffee sometime, because I always take care of my donors,
Yes, of course.
She thought it was, a date. But anyway, it was on, this is the ironic part. Norma and my wedding anniversary was September 14th. I was preaching at the Broadmoor Chapel here in Colorado Springs on our anniversary. And then that afternoon, I was going to go running with John Fugler. We were going to go running together. And I had like this 6 hours in the middle. I didn't know what to do. I go to my computer, and there is a text message from Willie she sent the night before. I hadn't seen it. Said, just wondering how you're doing. You lost your best friend. I want you to know that I'm praying for you. And I quickly answered back, because I knew she was a mountain hiker. I said, hey, I'm not doing anything. Let's go for a hike. So we go hiking here in Colorado. She tells her story of her cancer and going through it alone with no husband, no family around, no parents around. And how did she go through cancer all alone with surgery, chemo, radiation? She asked me, how is it to lose your wife of 45 years? How do you do that? So we're crying, we're laughing, we're praying. And it was an immediate, deep emotional and spiritual connection. We went over to the Broadmoor and drank coffee for 4 hours. And she drove home thanking God for introducing her to her husband.
Wow.
I'm a guy. It took me for about 4 days to realize that I wanted her in my life. But we knew right away.
That's so proud. Did she make a bigger donation also to the ministry?
I think she stopped giving.
Of course.
In that way.
Oh, man. That is a really beautiful story.
I lost a donor, but I won a wife, right?
There you go. That's a good book title. I like it.
Deal.
Lost a donor, but won a wife.
Well, Wayne, we could listen for a long time to you just talking about relationships and the richness in relationships, and also the intimacy we have with God and what the benefits are of that. But I'm also aware too, as we discuss this whole idea of loss and how to handle it and how to break through to freedom and opportunity, that there are so many people, especially in the last year or two, who have lost jobs. And I know you can relate to that. And there are still people struggling to find the job and still grieving over the one that they had, maybe the job they really loved, and now it's dried up, it's gone. Mm-hmm. So tell us your experience of losing a job or jobs and what the result was.
Well, I had been at KTIS for 34 years, and I thought I would retire there. While I was VP for broadcasting at Northwestern, I was on the executive committee and actually chairman of the board of NRB, National Religious Broadcasters. So I was serving that dual role. One day, Brant Gustafson, who was the president of NRB, called me and said, "Wayne, I've been diagnosed with cancer and I have 2 months to live." And my first thought, oh my, I have to find a president for NRB to replace Brant Gustafson, who is an icon.
Yes.
And little did I realize that eventually I would be that person. The board went through the process of searching, and I was very happy with my job at Northwestern. But I had to ask God, is this right? In fact, I asked Ron Klein, who was president of HCJB, "Ron, what would you do?" And he said, just let God decide. Just keep your name in, but let God decide. So I followed that. So in October of that year, the executive committee hired me as president of National Religious Broadcasters. And so we kept our house in Twin Cities, bought a place in DC area, and I began my serving as president of NRB. I love the job. I thought I was perfect for the job. I loved serving a large organization, being in front of people, running, this whole, working with my colleagues of many years in broadcasting. Along the way, I did an interview with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And in the interview, after I thought the interview was over and I was talking to the reporter and she was asking about religion and politics, why is NRB so involved in politics? And I made the statement that I think we need to be more focused on getting the gospel out than we are about changing the politics. She, unbeknownst to me, quoted me in the article, and all heck broke loose, and some of the members of NRB that were strongly involved in political and the Christian right started attacking me and said, "We don't want this guy as head of NRB." Long story short, I ended up losing my job. And with some power plays by some of the power brokers there, it was deeply disappointing because I loved the job. I left a job I loved than that I had had for 34 years to do this, and thought I was following God's will. And 5 months later, it's over. That's when I asked God, what was that all about? Did I hear correctly? So that was,
Yeah, I just think it's interesting sometimes how God will take us from something that we love to something else that we love, and then allow that to fall through the cracks like this happened, so he can have his greater for you, even, but how did you handle that disappointment? Because that's tough.
Well, and I'll just say it. I mean, it was unfair, at least from many perspectives. A comment like that, when you say, "Well, I really feel the priority is, sharing the gospel of Jesus," in many circles would be just, let's go, when they would champion that. But you're right. We were at a political time there where the agenda wasn't, it didn't exclude sharing the gospel, but it needed to include being politically forceful, if you will. And that would have been a terrible tension to have to deal with. And I know you didn't expect that it would end in loss of the job.
And it was very public. It was in the newspapers and the magazines and in media. I had literally hundreds of NRB people say, "You said the right thing. We needed to hear that. NRB needs to focus on the priority of the gospel." But, part of this is kind of maybe knocking some pride out of me. I love being in front of people. I love the big title. I love speaking and leading and the prestige of the job. And I mean, this whole thing just knocked the snot out of my pride. I mean, really. And Norma and I were driving back to Minneapolis on a cold February, dragging our sorry butts from Washington, D.C. to Minneapolis. And we stayed overnight in Indianapolis, got up in the morning, drove on some terribly icy roads between Indianapolis and Chicago, turned on the radio, heard Moody Radio and Erwin Lutzer. Erwin Lutzer was preaching on Joseph, how Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, and I had been betrayed by friends that I've had for years and years, how they sold him into slavery, and I was, sold to this whole thing. And when the brothers came back, he said to them, what you intended to harm, God intended for good. And Norma and I were just driving and crying. That's the answer. What others intended for harm, God intended for good. And the ironic part of this, a few years later, I was head of Moody Radio, and Erwin Lutzer was our pastor.
Wow.
Wow.
But that was a turning point on the road to Chicago, hearing that voice and saying, God is using this in your life. Just wait and see.
Yes, just wait and see.
I think that's the key right there, is just being open and aware of the new opportunities that God can bring. You had no idea what that might be, and you're still kind of going through your own grief. And that's what I want to just ask you about for a moment here, because again, loss is loss, whether it's unfairly given or just circumstantial. There are people right now who are really, really hurting over the loss of that job that they thought was going to turn out altogether different. Can you help them kind of walk through that process?
Well, gosh, it's not easy. I'm not saying that there's any magic formula. I don't mean to gloss over this and say it's just great. It's not. It's painful. The writer of Hebrews says the discipline is painful when it happens. There's no denying the pain. And Jesus said, have no doubt, in this world you will face tribulation. But he says, I have overcome the world. And the writer of Hebrews says that painful discipline produces good fruit in our lives. So you have to have the patience and the trust to work through the hard times, endure them, keep your focus on the Lord, not on the circumstances. Like Peter, keep your eyes on Jesus, not on the waves, and get through it. And to recognize that I can either get really bitter about this and get mad at God and get all bundled up, or I can use this. Okay, God, what do you have for me? What do I need to learn from this? I ask that many times. What can I learn from this? And what do you have for me next? And in terms of my own career, even though I love the NRB job, God led me to incredible opportunities with Moody in Chicago and with HCJB in Colorado Springs, traveling to all 5 continents continually, putting on hundreds of thousands of miles and meeting people that I could never have imagined possible. So I don't want to be too Pollyannish about this, because in this life, we don't always see the good things that come out of tragedy. And some of it we'll only know when we get to be in God's presence and we no longer see through a glass darkly, we'll see face to face. And then actually it won't even matter anymore because we're with Jesus and all that junk. Paul said it's not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed.
Yeah. Well, I think about how it is so common for most people to focus on the problem instead of focusing on the possible outcome and sticking with the having a solution-oriented mindset. And so with that, I mean, without being Pollyanna or any of that, and saying that, yes, it's tough. Do you have like a 1, 2, 3, here's what you need to do first? Do you write out what you're grateful for? Do you write out the pros and cons of what you came out of and where you desire to go? I mean, is there some kind of applicable thing that someone can practically do?
Aside from the obvious of get tight with God.
Exactly. Exactly.
Number one.
Yes.
Secondly is go to your support group. And I've been incredibly blessed. Todd knows this, meeting every month with a group. And Todd has done this with a different group, meeting with a group of six men to pray together, share everything together. They're my 2 a.m. friends. In fact, one of them in the group, I'll name him, Leith Anderson, said, Wayne, here's my cell phone. You can call me at 2 a.m. if you need to. Those kinds of friends.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the lunch meeting I had right after Norma's death, how they gathered around me, placed their hands on me, prayed for me, cried with me. So go to your support group would be second. Third is press forward. Paul said, forgetting the things that lie behind, not that you ever forget, but press towards the mark of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So keep looking forward. We can eat up our lives either looking back with regret or looking forward with anxiety, and we shouldn't do either one. We need to look forward with hope, knowing that God is in charge of our lives. He is sovereign. And Romans 8:28 is not just a cliche. God works all things together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose.
Beautiful.
So
very
so
encouraging words. That's a great 1, 2, 3 punch, by the way. It'll be in our show notes if you want a review on that, because that was well said. Hey, listen, before we let you go, I want you to just touch on what it really means to finish well in your relationship with God and everything you do on this planet. Not that, it will end for you soon. Nobody knows when it's going to end. You're in your early 70s and you're probably going to go well into your hundreds. So you've got still a ways on the journey, but what do we do to prepare now to really finish strong with God and make sure we take advantage of this opportunity that gives every one of us every day to leave a legacy?
I was told that the fourth quarter of our lives can be the most productive, the most satisfying seasons of our life. Football games are won and lost in the fourth quarter. And unfortunately, we see many in ministry that don't do well in the fourth quarter and they lose the game. That's unfortunate. Working with colleagues like Ken Larson of Slumberland and Robert Wolgemuth, we're talking. Robert just wrote a book called The Gun Lap. If you're a runner in a race, there are 4 laps, and the gun sounds when you start out, and before the 4th lap, a gun sounds. That's the gun lap. And Robert has written a book about that. How are you going to do in the 4th lap of your life?
Oh, that's good. That's
and what I have found, I talk about career in 4 seasons. One is worker. You're on front lines. You're doing everything hands-on. You're running the controls, carrying out the garbage. You're doing whatever hands-on work. Yeah. Secondly, if you're good, you get promoted to management, and then you're doing your work through others. Others do the work, but you're managing them. And then, so a worker, manager, and then leader. If you get to the place where in your leadership, you're responsible for creating a culture, helping create a strategy and a focus and a passion and a direction. The 4th quarter is influence. I'm no longer running a large $50 million organization that I was once doing, but I am having opportunity through the boards that I serve on, through the consulting that I do,
through the podcast that you're on,
podcasting, have the opportunity to make an influence that's not dependent on being a supervisor or a manager. It's a great season. And I can choose what I want to do, not what I have to do, which is a good thing. But now to invest in the lives of others. When you get old, people think you know something and they call and say, I need some help. Will you mentor me? Will you help? And so that's the season we're in. I want to finish strong. I have more energy now than I've ever had in my life. I think I have a good bit more wisdom than I had when I was a silly 30-year-old that thought I knew everything. And this is a season with the energy and the wisdom that comes from God. Totally. When I'm consulting or whatever, I'm amazed at what comes out of my mouth. And I know it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit giving me that wisdom. Yeah. So it's a tremendous season. And Willie and I have a fabulous marriage. We have a fabulous ministry. We have a happy, glorious life together. And we're moving to Florida. We're moving from cold Colorado to hot, humid Naples, Florida, and starting a new season. So in a way, we feel we're just beginning.
Wow.
That is so
cool.
So
you're not sure if it's the gun lap or the start of the race because you keep shifting in these seasons of life. But I think that's great. Those are great words.
Does the gun have a different tone at whichever lap you're at? Oh, that's so great, good. Wayne. You are just amazing at all that God has allowed you to do through the course of your life thus far, and you're just getting started. Like you said, you've got more energy than ever, and you've made such an impact in many, and you will continue to do so. And you have, and Todd and I, and we can't wait to see you and Willie in Florida sometime soon. But God bless you. Thank you for sharing today. Thank you for sharing how we can overcome loss and see it as God sees it, not as we see it in the flesh.
Yeah.
And that even in this relationship with Todd, it's kind of like, Todd, we're circling back to the stuff, we used to do on a high intensive level 30 years ago. And that's another thing that happens in the fourth quarter. You reconnect with longtime friends, which is
yes. I'll cheer you on, you cheer me on, and together we'll cheer everybody else on.
That's good.
All right, my friend.
Hey, we thank you for being on the show,
Yes.
and we will talk to you soon. God bless.
Okay.
Thanks, Wayne.
Bye.
Wow.
All right. What a great interview. He's such a special man, huh?
Yeah. I have I've valued a lot from our friendship over the years, and I never stopped learning. And I know this guy pretty well inside and out.
Yeah.
But he'll still drop some wisdom bombs on me, like he did. Like I want to go back and listen to this podcast because some of these things that he said they have such richness in their meaning, and so relevant in their application.
Right.
And listener friend, I hope that's been true for you today, that you'll find application for your life as you go through various seasons and various losses.
Yes. And I love that there's that season of the fourth quarter and to finish strong. I love that analogy. So thank you so much for tuning in. And we hope you'll share this with your friends and your family, and you'll give us a rating and a review. But thanks so much for just joining us each and every week right here on Your Biggest Breakthrough. We'll catch you next time.